Hello and welcome to the Pivot Leadership Podcast, where we explore the intricacies of pivot leadership. I've used neurological science to create the Pivot framework to assist leaders in understanding their response to the environment they work in and those of their colleagues to unlock performance and drive innovation. To pivot, you must build perseverance, inclusion, value, optimization, and trust. With my guests, we'll unpack these principles and discuss how each one is imperative to building strong leaders. On today's episode, we're focusing on perseverance. A leader who perseveres is ready for the long haul and is able to propel their teams towards purpose. Today's guest is perfect to talk on this subject. A born adventurer, wilderness guide, and survivalist, this guest demonstrates perseverance throughout all facets of her career. She organises and leads adventures to remote wilderness environments and works closely with diverse communities worldwide. As a qualified resilience coach, she combines an innate knowledge of wilderness survival, a degree in psychology, and a fascination with the psychology of survival to help clients overcome mental health struggles. So I'm pleased to welcome none other than the amazing Megan Hine.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to be catching up again.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the last time that we actually were together, Meg. I think it was on a talk where you delivered a resilience talk for us during COVID, I think, in lockdown. Was that right?
Cracky, was it that long ago? Like, so much has changed. It's been amazing watching your business grow and seeing where things are going.
Oh, thank you. Well, seeing you on Instagram and obviously following you as like one of my homegirls, I kind of see you pop up in all these crazy locations doing all of your great work, and knowing you and what you're about behind the scenes and the work that you do and the work that you put into that behind the scenes, I had to invite you onto the podcast because I know that my community of leaders would really want to know actually what perseverance means to you and the work that you do within that. So I've got some kind of questions that we want to ask you, but nothing's off topic. You know, we can just take this conversation wherever it goes. Could you kind of just give everyone who's listening a bit of background to your journey so far and what led you into this career? Because I've had snippets of this, but I think that, you know, the story would be really great.
Sure, no worries. So I'm a wilderness guide, survivalist, and founder of Psych Media Solutions. In essence, I make inaccessible wilderness regions of the world accessible. So predominantly my work is film related, TV adventure survival shows in particular. So my role kind of starts at the beginning of the concept of a show and new ideas and bouncing backwards and forwards and helping kind of develop the creative in conjunction with looking at the safety side of things. And then we'll look for locations sort of remotely, and then I'll get sent out onto the ground to go scout and put journeys together. So I started off initially as a stunt rigger on TV shows, which is scary, like 15, 16 years ago now, and kind of moved into that kind of more managerial role now. So still very much involved in the stunt rigging, but linking like the creative and linking the safety together. So leading quite big teams in quite complex and often high risk situations and environments.
Wow, yeah. So really putting sort of perseverance and resilience to the test, because I often get the challenge in the classroom is how can you teach leaders or execs resilience skills in the classroom, you know, because everyone's looking for that sort of high risk, high stake type of scenario. So you're really going to bring that insight today for us, and that's going to be hugely beneficial. So what about the sort of history behind Meg and the story into this? Because that's obviously what you do, but how did you do this? I mean, this is not the everyday kind of role you apply for. You see it on, you know, job spec and you think, I want that. How did this come about?
So I'm really lucky actually that I found a career that I love right from the very start. When I was at school, I didn't know anything like this existed. I was very lucky that I had a very outdoorsy background and upbringing. Both my parents were really sort of into their mountaineering and climbing and hiking. My dad was originally a geologist, so we spent a lot of time in our family holidays up close and personal with rocks, kind of climbing and looking for fossils and things. And yeah, it just kind of developed this real love of being outside and pushing myself. So I got into mountain biking quite early on And I was just fascinated to see like how far I could go, how hard I could push myself, and kind of pushing myself through kind of pain and overcoming like physical challenges. And that happened at quite a young age, which I think has really kind of set me up for the work that I do now. I was very involved with the military cadets as well, and did a lot of adventurous training through them. I was very fortunate that I was allowed to participate on these sort of adventurous training camps without there being any female cover present, which would totally not be allowed now. So I did have these amazing opportunities that came my way, and I made the most of that. And then when I was kind of coming up to the end of school, I guess I kind of just fell into the outdoor instruction. I took a year out between school and university and went out to New Zealand, which is somewhere I'd always wanted to go, and ended up working in an outdoor centre out there and sort of taking people out climbing and into the hills. And I just realised that you could actually do a career in this. So, I came back to the UK, picked up my outdoor qualifications. So really kind of started instructing, guiding at the age of 17. And then went to do a degree in sort of outdoor leadership and studies around like the philosophy and psychology of why people go into the outdoors and how best to support people in that. Then started doing a lot of overseas expeditions, particularly centred around Indigenous cultures, and going and spending time with native peoples and putting their skills into practice with clients out in jungles and deserts. And then, kind of discovered the TV world and ended up sort of working with a little known presenter at the time called Bear Grylls, who then obviously became quite massive. And I was part of his core team for over a decade before I set up Psych Media Solutions, and now sort of consulting for many different shows.
Wow. Just wow. What an amazing career so far. And, I'm hoping when we get to the end of this podcast, we talk about what's next. So I don't want to go there yet, but wow, I think there's a lot that we can learn in terms of young people coming into the workforce in corporates from your journey. I wrote down there, I took some notes, love and purpose linking quite strongly together. And that, for me, when teaching perseverance, you've got to know what the purpose is that you're driving towards, which is the prize. What are we going through the pain zone for here? What are we persevering towards? So that really kind of resonated for me. And I think anyone coming through on the trajectory in the corporate world needs to kind of really hang on to that, because I think sometimes that can get lost when we get led by paychecks and ego, or where we might be going in our leadership. We've still got to have that essence of purpose and love at the centre of what we're doing. Otherwise, perseverance probably doesn't really exist. But I'm sure you'll tell me more about that in a moment. So amazing journey. Can you give me some examples of how perseverance has supported your expeditions then, and in the exciting work that you do?
Well, I think perseverance for me is about kind of being able to keep going no matter what and finding solutions. And that's something that I do a lot in the work that I do, trying to get film crews to really remote places where there's no infrastructure, where we've got anything from a team of kind of 15 people, which is a very small film crew really, through to sort of 350 people out in these kind of quite remote terrains. How we keep them safe, looking for locations and trying to get permits and things like that for making these shows happen, because a lot of times now we're faced with budgets getting ever tighter, timeframes getting tighter, and I'm having to turn around stuff much quicker. So, perseverance and just problem solving all the time. So when I'm dealing with what we call local fixers, so these are the people that are on the ground that help me make things happen. So if I need to find certain things, or I need to find a certain terrain, or items, or whatever it might be, getting permits sorted, I'm liaising with our in-country fixers to make this happen. And some cultures really will often just try to make you happy by saying yes to everything. And it's trying to build up that relationship a lot of the time between myself and them, and and the teams, so that they can say no to me if something's not possible, because I like yeses and I like nos. I don't like maybes or this grey area, because when we're trying to turn stuff around really fast, If you get a maybe, you just don't know. Whereas a no or a yes, I can do something with that, and then it's about problem solving, and it's just like, okay, now we've got this issue that's just popped up. We've got a no from here, so how can we make it happen? And that's what I really love, and that's perseverance. And it's not necessarily about blindly continuing on one path. It's like being able to be open-minded to all these other paths that are potentially in front of you that you could take to reach that end goal.
Yeah, yeah. So it's I'm almost like it's ambiguity is the biggest killer, isn't it, of resilience? And without resilience, we can't persevere. So that, yeah, I need a yes or I need a no, I think is a really good message that we can take away in leadership, and making sure that we get that when we're collaborating, because we don't always get that. We're just forever collaborating and keeping everyone kind of what we think is happy. And then we have a really big dip in resilience and people can't persevere when things go wrong. So I thought you would just explain that really, really well. I love that. So, you've got this degree in psychology. So you've got, you're a heavyweight in how the brain works and in personality traits. So I love that. That's what I geek out on. How does this link to the work you're doing now?
So the psychology side of it has been something that I've been interested in for a very long time. And initially, I started seeing it when I was doing a lot more expedition leading, of going out into environments and having clients come along that were maybe on medications for anxiety or depression, and they would choose to come off of those medications while we were on these expeditions. And this was pre-mobile phone signal being so good everywhere, and to kind of remote areas where we still don't see mobile signal and connectivity and things. And they'd come off their medication, and within a few days they'd be feeling much better and happier about it. And it really kind of got me thinking about, like, well, what is it about this scenario that is obviously making them feel better and more connected with themselves, with the world around them, and with the team. And sitting around the campfire, I'm sure anybody who's kind of sat around the fire with a beer in hand, it's amazing like how much that there's something about those scenarios that makes you open up. And I see this a lot on expeditions where people are sitting around the fire, and it's just like, you're like, a few days ago you didn't know that the other people in that team existed, and yet you're kind of telling the people around you like far more than you tell your closest friends or family. And as a team, you're really supportive of each other, and there's something about those scenarios. So it kind of made me really start investigating this and why it is, and what is it about being on expedition or being in these kind of remote wilderness areas that is obviously so beneficial to our mental health, which kind of led me to kind of realize that our brains just haven't evolved to live as we do in the modern world. And so much of obesity, anxiety, a lot of mental health issues, symptoms really of this world that we've created as a species, which we're absolutely incredible, very creative, but also very destructive as well. And then looking at that power, and so my fascination kind of research really at the moment, and I'm actually just about to head off to Borneo with a project that's quite related to this, to investigate, like looking at the evolution of the stress response and how that has played a part in shaping who we are and our thoughts and emotions.
Deep. I want to know more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, this really aligns with what we teach on the perseverance class, actually, as we talk about, the limbic hijack and what can happen in times of stress in an organization. And then how we have to kind of assess our present situation, understand the pain that we're going to be experiencing because of that, but what are we going to persevere towards as the prize? So that's the kind of 3P model that we use in perseverance. So I could hear some of that coming through, but your deeper understanding of psychology is great and really helpful for our listeners. I want to touch on this pain piece, if I can, just to kind of really unpack that. So thinking about stress response and how we try and avoid having a stress response, and we also avoid pain, or we go into overwhelm with a huge stress response, sometimes where we've like completely lost perspective and the pain isn't as bad as what we think it's going to be. So I see that a lot in leaders when they're reacting to stress in the workplace. And I just wanted to kind of get your take on that, because you mentioned really early on in your career, like how when you were younger and you were like testing your pain in like the outside world and to know what you could persevere, towards. Can you give our listeners some examples of some of the kind of like perseverance tests you've given yourself just in your kind of training to help with that, stress response, because that is a muscle, right? And please correct me if you've got a different interpretation of that. But if we can, allow ourselves to experience a level of stress, we can bounce forward and learn from that, and then be able to tolerate stress in a healthier way, is my understanding. But I want to hear some about some of these early childhood stress tests that you've been giving yourself.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And like, we grow resilience by challenging ourselves and stepping outside of our comfort zone, which is why, when we look at kind of younger, some of the younger generations now are in quite stressful environments, but there's no kind of let up, but yet they're not able to necessarily go and run around outside and climb trees and fall out of trees and kind of build resilience in like that more healthy way, which is something that I'm quite involved with the Scout organisation. And their Skills for Life program looks at this. It's about encouraging young people to go and get as many different experiences as possible, like in the community, in music and art, and pushing themselves out of their comfort zone, in like talking to other people, sort of different cultures and things as well, and constantly putting themselves out of their comfort zone to help build that tolerance to stress. So when they're older, they've got a better understanding and more of a kind of safety net underneath them, if you like, a buffer.
Yeah.
But yeah, for my own, it was very much about going out and just seeing what I was physically capable of. I didn't know so much, when I was at school. I didn't really think so much about the psychological side of things, but they kind of go hand in hand, really, because it's amazing. I've seen this in sort of remote expedition work, when people are like able to achieve things that they didn't even think was possible. And yes, the body's willing, but the mind needs to go along, because often it's the mind that holds us back. Our bodies are physically capable of some quite incredible feats. For myself, it was very much about kind of pushing myself, mountain biking, running, climbing, just to see what I was capable of, and where I could take that. And then taking myself off, my parents, like, it was amazing now when I look back on it, would let me go off when I was like 9 or 10 and go camping out in like Snowdonia by myself and things. I'd go off for several days, and this was pre-mobile phones, so it's like but my dad would make me like plot a route and do my little route card and give that to him, so they had an idea of where I was. And it's like they'd drop me off at one point and then they'd pick me up like 3 days later at the point that we'd agreed on. And it was just, when I look back on it now, there was if I'd got into trouble, there was no mobile phone signal or anything to call for help. But that makes you very reliant. And that also teaches you to take ownership of your actions as well, which I think in the way that our society is set up now, oftentimes it's very easy to place the blame onto other people than actually look at ourselves and actually take ownership of our actions, because the consequences aren't quite so dire.
Yeah. Wow, can you imagine me dropping my children off for 3 days now and saying see you in 3 days? I might have to really look into my parenting strategies here to see if I can build some perseverance in them. Wow, I knew there would be, I didn't know that was going to be the story, but I knew there would be some experiments in there for sure to build your ability to persevere. And that really kind of links with the workplace missions we try and set up. Obviously, I'm a corporate trainer. I deliver leadership training in the classroom. I setting up some kind of wilderness or survival environment is quite challenging for me with the resources that I work within. But we do have what we call on the journey, I call it the wilderness, where I set them up with workplace missions to go and experiment with what we're talking about in the classroom. And I see it, the shock and surprise of that in itself, a set of instructions. I'll see you in 6 weeks. Let's see how you get on. And then it's just like an overwhelm or panic mode within that, and a lack of the ability to explore. So I'm really keen to build those kind of skills in leaders to be able to kind of just step into that and experiment with that space.
I think what you're doing as well there is, being able to give people that safe space in the classroom when they aren't necessarily out of their comfort zone. Because if you want to just like talk about theories and have people understand it on a logical point, you have to be in a safe space in your head. Otherwise, you're acting in like that stress response and you just can't absorb anything or take anything on. So actually, doing the theory in the classroom beforehand is so relevant and definitely the best place for it.
No, great. I'm glad you think that. Maybe we could collaborate. We'll start in the classroom. I'll do some wilderness work and then we'll get out there. That would be great.
The combination of that, because that's something that because I really started like exploring like the power of, you know, the outdoors as a potential therapeutic tool when I was asked to be involved in an anti-poaching ranger training program. So it was kind of like a train the trainer, if you like. This a 6-month program where they bring rangers from all over Africa into place, and they teach them leadership skills, they teach them sort of management, anti-poaching techniques and things, but they wanted to teach them resilience because there isn't the resources like financially for them to be able to help treat them for PTSD and things. And a lot of these rangers, like men and women, are, you know, involved in firefights on some of them a weekly basis. But there isn't the resources to be able to support them emotionally. So it's kind of, well, then how can we potentially equip them better beforehand with an understanding of what might happen? So we got our heads together and thought about how we could best kind of use this. And very much like yourself, it was like, well, we did the theoretical side of it with them. And then we started using height, which is like an exposure, which is, you know, something I think most of us would understand that if you're standing on top of a cliff on the edge, it's like that kind of fear and anxiety kind of triggers because it's not a safe place to be. So we started playing around with that and did a lot of like rock climbing and rappelling, and we built this big via ferrata, which is these kind of metal cables that go up cliffs and things where they have to climb up over that. And it's what we saw was incredible because it was a way of being able to use the perception of risk, because once people are clipped onto ropes and things, the chances of anything going wrong are minimal. It was playing with that perception of risk to help them understand the emotions and help them understand how to learn to control that. And that just made me think, well, you know, if it's relevant and works in an environment, you know, where people are literally being kind of shot at, surely this is something that we can like transfer into the corporate world or into everyday life as well.
Yeah. And that kind of really links to my next question. So I'm just going to get straight into it because I think that learning experience would be invaluable. And it's about teaching this persistence. So what do you think persistence brings to leadership, even if things become challenging? I know we said it's not about relentless persistence to persevere, but how do you think perseverance and this ability to be persistent contributes to good leadership from your perspective?
Well, persistence for me is that I know what my end goal is. So if I'm on a film shoot, for example, I know that, you know, we have to deliver. We've got a time frame and it's often quite short. And by that date, we have to have shot all the footage. We've got, potentially our host or our celebrity or our on-screen talent for a very short period of time. And we have this end goal that we have to meet. And I kind of work backwards from that. And then like that persistence is like from my side as leading my teams is like, we have to make this job work one way or another. We have to get to that end point. It's totally never going to be a linear journey. So it's like, it's being open all the time to every time something, you know, we have a problem arise, it's about then overcoming that problem. And that's where actually having my team, and this is where I love it now, to be able to bring in people who are far more experienced in me than in their specialist skills. And that just makes me so happy when I've got this team of like incredible specialists working with me, that I can then use like the kind of like the resources I've got in my team and, you know, deploy them out to go and problem solve that while we're exploring other avenues at the same time. And it's quite fun. I see it as like this game. It's like, there's our end goal. And it's like, how do we get there? What have I got in my kind of toolkit, in my arsenal here, like mentally, physically, in my team, that I can actually use to kind of move around the board, if you like, to get to that point. And I think, you know, sometimes for us as leaders, when our own stress responses are triggered because we're not getting enough sleep, we're not looking after ourselves physically, emotionally very well because we're under such pressure to achieve that goal, sometimes it's very easy to lose the fun of it all because we're just trying to survive ourselves. And it's then trying to find ways then to be able to bring it back, give ourselves space in the day to be able to kind of have that oversight of like, actually, you know, this is fun, and not get drawn into kind of the nitty gritty and the emotional stuff and the politics that are happening out there on the ground as well.
Yeah, that was really interesting because, you know, we started talking about like the the networks that we have within our team and that skill set, and how we use that in leadership to support us to be able to persevere, having the flexibility. But then I was sort of taking a message of, you can't just kind of just be able to persevere in the moment without doing all of that self-care and prep and that proactive stuff beforehand, before stresses appear. Because otherwise you're in a stress response, you're kind of low on energy, not resilient, and then you're being asked to persevere as well. I mean, it's almost an impossible task. And I think if leaders can't learn to manage that energy on a day-to-day basis in their role in the corporate world, then perseverance is going to be a struggle. So, it's about the whole sustainment, isn't it, of that individual who is leading.
It's so hard as well. And, as resources get tighter and timeframes get tighter, it's really hard. It is really hard when often as the leader, you're like in this kind of shit sandwich, if you like, because you're kind of stuck in between. The team on the ground are struggling because we don't necessarily have the financial resources to be able to make stuff work, and you're supporting your team out on the ground and trying to protect them, if you like, from the shit that's coming down from above. And then you've got people who are above you who are answering to people who are even higher, and it's just this kind of like craziness, and you're the one that's kind of stuck in the middle because you're the one who has to facilitate it all and make sure it happens, but you need to protect your assets on the ground. So you're kind of holding a lot of emotional stuff that, once you start getting tired, I'm often on a job and I'll be out there for like months on end. So like, for example, like last year, I was out in Panama and I was out there for 3 months. And that's 3 months with no days off. I'm supposed to have a day off every 6 days, but it doesn't happen. And that, so it's like 3 months of no days off, very little sleep, don't have like a big enough team for the job really that we're trying to do. And I'm getting so much like pressure from above because it's a new show, it's massive, there's a lot of money that's been invested into it. But I'm trying to protect my team because my team's so small that I can't burn them out. And, that's really hard because it's also, once you get tired, you're not necessarily eating properly or sleeping properly just because of the very nature of it, that you have to like be very careful not to start taking stuff personally. And that's where having people externally who are completely unrelated to the project is really important. So whether that's friends, family, a professional that you have a relationship with, and that you're able to have counseling, therapy, anything to kind of be able to support you in doing your job, because it's like burnout happens, it's kind of very slow on set and you don't notice it coming, but it's incredibly detrimental. And as leaders of teams in high pressure environments, like we are the prime candidates for going through that experience, and it's not fun.
No, absolutely. We need to definitely get skilled up on that sustainment, how we sustain ourselves, and better to be able to do that. Oh, it's so relatable, Meg. Thank you so much. I've just got a few more questions just to kind of wrap up, because I know you're off on a big, exciting trip soon, so I don't want to kind of manage to squeeze into your schedule. So can you give us some methods or strategies you would personally use in the face of challenges or difficulties? Just a couple for our community of leaders to kind of tap into.
Yeah, so there's a few bits that I did. So back in just pre-COVID, actually, I was suffering burnout. I got diagnosed with burnout, which is why, in a way, COVID was such a blessing because it allowed me to properly recover. But it kind of made me really think about the way that I work, and it's actually simple things that I do each day, because I think as high achievers, as people who like to find solutions and be pushing and managing teams and things, often we're so fixated on the goal that we forget about ourselves. And so what I started doing initially was taking 10 minutes a day where I'd put my phone aside, I'd block out any other kind of interruptions, and I would just take 10 minutes to myself, whether that was just sitting, preferably out in nature, and kind of listening, like really kind of focusing on like the wind in the trees, the plants around me, the birds, and really being present. And it's amazing, like to start with it, 10 minutes sounds like nothing, but it's amazing when you're so busy and when there's so much pressure on you that you feel incredibly guilty for taking that time out. You feel guilty and selfish. And it's actually, allowing yourself those moments is so important. And that was a massive step for me, because that now I can take longer periods of time without feeling guilty. And it's essential for us. I don't have a family, but for female leaders that have got families, and and men that are very involved in the child's care, that's a huge extra burden to have on top of that. And that 10 minutes a day that you can then hopefully extend into more is essential. And then having other people that you can talk to outside of the immediate situation that you've got. Communication is really important. And if you're struggling, if you're starting to burn out, if you're noticing that you're starting to forget things more than usual, then really kind of reach out, potentially, have like professional support around you as well, whether that's counselor, psychologist, therapist. It's not a weakness. We all need that support, and we all need people that can help us process emotions and what we're going through. And then for actually in the field, it's actually finding the fun in the problem solving and actually seeing it as a game and like moving people around. And that's where it's just for me, I was just like, suddenly it's just not this super stressful thing. It's like, right, this is actually this is what we're good at. This is why we've been employed as leaders or in the positions that we're in, because we're good at this stuff and we need to find the fun in it.
Oh, I love those three. So I'm really noticing a theme from this podcast today. So, we've got like understand the present environment to persevere, understand the pains to persevere, the prize, be on purpose. We've got give yourself permission to pause, was what I just wrote down from what you just said about having that time for yourself, fun in the problem solving, and having people around us, both professionally and personally. So it's all about the P's for perseverance. And I can't thank you enough for your time today and sharing all of your experiences with us about perseverance. And I think we'll be talking more, Meg, about working together definitely on this, if you're up for that.
It's so beneficial, and it's something that I think we all need to talk about more, because there's always been this thing, I think, as if you're in a leadership position, so often you feel quite isolated because you feel like you can't kind of talk to the team below you because they need to be doing their job and they need to be feeling supported, and it's like often you've got nowhere to go. And actually coming together as groups and actually talking and realizing that you're not alone in how you might be feeling or the struggles that you might be dealing with in the moment is really important and incredibly powerful.
Yeah, you're so right. Meg, you are the ultimate pivot leader in my eyes. So thank you so much for coming on to the Pivot Leadership Podcast. Can you just tell our listeners where they can find out more about you?
So either my website, www.psychmediasolutions.com, or my personal one, meganhine.com, or on Instagram, Megan Hine.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Emma.